I can hold this up and say...
Well, I'm going to introduce
okay.
first.
Okay, we'll do that first.
The formal part of this. So, hi there. Hi, everybody. I'm Carole Freeman of Hypnotic Nutrition. I'm the creator of the 90-Day Ketogenic Diet Challenge. And I'm here today with Dr. Vicki Rhoades. She's a naturopathic doctor. And we're going to talk about her experience and use of a low-carb diet in order to manage or control her diabetes. And so you brought some toys today.
I brought some toys.
Actually, first, tell us your name again, who you are.
Okay, I'm Victoria Rhoades, and I'm a naturopathic doctor with a practice in Lake Forest, Washington. And in, let's see, this is 2013, I had my medical doctor tell me that I was diabetic. I clearly met that threshold, and I was shocked because I thought I had a good diet. So I started using my toy here, a glucometer, to measure what foods were really triggering my blood sugars to spike.
Okay.
And today, I took my blood sugar. Let's see, is it still on? No, I'm going to have to turn it back on again. And I just took it. This is before I haven't had anything to eat since breakfast this morning.
Okay.
So, and it reads 104. I'm assuming that you can see it there.
Yeah.
Great.
So how long has it been since you had breakfast?
I had breakfast this morning at, I'm going to guess around 8 or so.
Okay, and so we're at 1:30, so that's about 4.5.
I did have 2 pieces of cheese since then.
Okay.
So, and breakfast was 2 boiled eggs with mayonnaise and some radishes.
Okay. So that was about 4 hours ago,
Right.
4.5. Do the math.
4.5.
And then you had some cheese about how long ago?
Maybe about an hour ago.
Okay. All right.
And so, and 104 is a real typical value for me at this time of the day.
Okay.
So, and I've got this lovely treat in front of me that I am going to use to demonstrate just exactly how much 2 slices of bacon will raise my blood sugar.
All right. Treat.
And it's very much your results may vary. So I'm not sure when I'm supposed to eat this, if I'm supposed to talk too.
Yeah, if you want to consume it now, then at the end of our interview, we can check your blood sugar again. It'll give us about an hour's time to see how that affects things. So, that's one of the perks of being on set here is bacon snacks. So
bacon snacks,
yeah.
Hey, highly recommended. It's very tasty.
Yeah, it's they're in ketogenic diet actually has its origins in treating epilepsy, and you'll see a lot of the old research on that. The researchers will comment about how the diet is really hard to maintain long term because it's highly unpalatable. However, this was back when they were still, using soybean oil poured into milkshakes is how they got little kids to get into ketosis,
Right.
and how they got them to be able to have a high-fat diet was eating a lot of oils and things. And so now with all our wonderful culinary wisdom and creativity that we have, there is no reason that a low-carb diet has to be unpalatable at all. In fact, most people report that it's the most delicious foods they've ever eaten, and they're very satisfied. They look forward to their meals. So bacon is one of those things that's very low carb, high fat, moderate protein, pretty low in protein actually. So
Yeah, I'd have to say that this is very tasty because precisely it has a lot of fat to it.
okay, yeah. Yeah. Well, what else can we say about that?
Mouthful.
Mouthful, yes, yes. Bacon.
It is bacon good.
Bacon good.
May I have a tissue, please? Thank you. It is.
A little extra oils on
a
your
little
fingers,
extra
yeah.
oil
Yeah.
on the fingers, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to keep this finger clean so that I can test it
Right.
again in another hour or
All
so.
right.
So,
Well, tell us more. So 2013 is when you got the
2013.
shocking news.
right, and it did really take me aback. It was really, pretty crazy. It's like, at first your brain doesn't even process it. It's like, this can't be true.
Because you were eating a very healthy, whole foods diet.
Right.
You had no reason to ever suspect
Right.
it.
Right, and I was kind of surprised at some of the things that really triggered a blood sugar. And this involved me finding out, what my first morning blood sugar was. Finding out through trial and error when my blood sugar tends to peak after eating something. So the peak for me, and it probably isn't true for everyone, is going to be about 1 hour after I eat.
Okay.
My medical doctor told me to measure 2 hours after eating. She told me that I needed to be eating about, I think it was 45 grams of carbohydrate per meal.
Yeah, that's pretty typical recommendation.
With 15 grams snacks in between meals.
Okay.
So it was a lot. And through trial and error, I have found that it's more like 10 or 15 grams per meal, and so for a total of about 45 grams per day. So it's probably not a ketosis kind of diet, but it is definitely a lower carb kind of diet.
Yeah.
She also wanted to put me on metformin, which I declined.
Okay. So in the beginning, the recommendation was to go for 45 grams of carbs per meal, and then having snacks in between.
Whole grains.
15 grams for snacks as well. Right. And you were following that initially, right?
I tried it initially, and I discovered that my blood sugars, a bowl of plain oatmeal would get me up well over 150.
Okay.
So clearly the whole grains thing wasn't working, and I just decided to set an upper limit for after meals of 140.
Okay.
Which is a very modest kind of goal. It really was just not trying to be crazy about it. And over time, and I told her, you know, I declined the metformin. She said, I'm still going to want to test you in a couple months, as you should.
Yeah.
This is not something we want to persist. And when I went on back, my glycosylated hemoglobin, diabetic is 6.5, and I had just hit that threshold. It had come down to 6.0.
Okay.
And I think that kind of took the starch out of her a little bit.
So this was after you were monitoring your blood sugar.
Right, and I'd set that ceiling for myself.
Okay.
And I had decided that, and I had seen for myself that I really wasn't doing well with that much carbohydrate.
Okay.
So I had already reeled in the carbohydrate quite a little bit. And, you know, as you've also discovered, a high-fat diet tends to have a fair amount of satiety. I'm not concerned about getting adequate calories.
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about getting excess calories, because the satiety thing, the feeling of fullness, is significant enough that you really don't want to be eating a whole lot, unless I've maybe been out hiking or something like that. And then it's, some extra calories are a good thing.
Yeah.
But just following what my body is telling me I need to have seems to be much, much easier. And over time, the glycosylated hemoglobin has dropped further. 6.0 is in the pre-diabetic range. It dropped down at the 1-year point to 5.7, still pre-diabetic, but very low end of the pre-diabetic range. And the most recent is 5.5, which is out of the pre-diabetic range and into the normal range.
Yay!
Yay! So and just by tracking how the blood sugars respond to different foods and following it, at first I was feeling hunger. And I think this is how diabetes kind of plays with you, is I was feeling hungry at a blood sugar of like 110. It'd be like, it's time to eat.
Yeah.
And over time, my threshold of when I feel hungry has dropped. So I don't feel the hunger until I'm in the 90s, which is way more normal.
Yeah.
And I suspect that it's going to continue to drop over time, maybe not as radically as it did at first, but just kind of, it'll, you know, if it stays at 5.5, that's good. I'm fine.
Okay.
So I would say I've had a good deal of success with this.
Okay. Well, and beyond getting your A1C down into the normal range and your blood sugars, both fasting and post-meal, into the normal ranges, what other things have you noticed by doing this?
I definitely shed a few pounds. It has been easy. Once you get into the rhythm of it, it's easy to follow.
Okay.
It is tasty and satisfying. My blood pressure also dropped quite a little bit.
Okay.
My cholesterol is, it's maybe been a little iffy, but the HDL is definitely on the high side.
So your HDL, did it go up or just stay
Oh,
up?
the HDL is gone up.
Okay.
And I don't know how much of that is from the diet and how much of it is because we've got an active dog and we have to walk him quite a little bit. So, you know, sometimes you find more than one thing, but I certainly have enough energy to be going out and walking a dog quite a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm probably averaging at least half an hour to 45 minutes of walking per day.
Yeah.
And I'm just recently, I did you probably should have come to this.
Oh.
There was an offer at Kenmore CrossFit of doing a sampler of what CrossFit's like.
Oh.
And it looks really awesome.
Oh, okay.
So I'm looking at starting the fundamentals class on Monday for that. But yeah, and I felt it, you know.
So contrasting then, let's say 4 years ago, your energy level compared to now.
It's definitely improved.
Okay.
I've made more of a focused effort to get out and get exercising more. I was, 4 years ago, wasn't doing a whole heck of a lot. I was struggling to maintain a weight of about 160 to 165.
Okay.
I'm now more like 148 at the most recent doctor's appointment. So, and which, maybe 15 pounds doesn't sound like a heck of a lot, but it's significant.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't something like you didn't set out to restrict calories to lose
Right.
weight. It was just,
Right.
I'm going to get my blood sugar in the normal range, and that was a byproduct.
I've got the funniest thing that a friend of mine said on Facebook last night. She said 1,200 calories a day is BS. And I messaged her back on Facebook and said, yes, it's BS. We'll talk about the science sometime.
As far as
For right now, just know that it is in fact BS.
Like that artificial number of you should eat 1,200 calories a day as a diet, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think she's also trying to run, and she's probably doing a higher carb diet.
Yeah.
If you're doing higher carbs, you and I both know 1,200 calories a day, you're going to be starving all the time and probably kind of cranky too.
Yes. Yeah. And well, so, going back to the energy thing, that's always, before I did this type of diet, that was a myth that I bought into, that if you reduce carbs, you're not going to have any energy, and that you need carbs for energy.
And I think that what you see is in ketosis is that you flip over to using ketones for energy. It can fuel your brain, it can fuel your muscles, it works just fine. Where I'm at with it is I literally, when I'm out hiking, I go through a transition phase where I've run out of the glycogen, which is the muscle's version of carbohydrate. I've run out of blood sugar, and I kind of need a little while to shift over to using ketones. And it does happen. We've got a media whore here.
Yes, he is.
So it does take some time to shift over, but the shift does happen. You can feel it happening. You might want to take a little bit of a break. Sometimes I just break down and I'll have a little bit of a snack in the meantime. But, if I make it a high-fat snack, I'm more likely to be running on ketones, whereas if I make it a high-carb snack, and for me, high-carb, it's like 15 grams, so it's really not very much. So it really works better to stick to the higher-fat kinds of snacks. And there's more and more of these products that are out there that are easy to pack when you're going hiking. They don't take up a lot of space. It's not like I'm trying to pack a little, peanut butter and I don't know what would be a celery kind of snack, which would be messy and kind of hard to carry with you. It would get mushed around inside whatever container you put it in. So it's a lot easier to get. You can get these epic bars that have got, they're basically like a beef jerky. They're
like
maybe a little
meat.
softer kind of thing. Yeah. Super supplements, baby. They're all over at Super Supplements.
The little plug there for
right. The local supplement shop.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. I had another question brewing in my mind, and I
think we did this once before. I realize you're going to cut and paste here.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about my top 3 tips.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and my top 3 tips. Number 1 is.
So here, I'll ask. How about this?
Okay, you can do it like that.
Yeah. Well, so you've been doing this long enough now that you probably have come up with some, strategies for being really successful at this. So what are your top 3 tips that you might have that you'd like to share?
Okay, the top 3 tips. If you're diabetic, 1, get one of these handy little glucometers. These things are definitely worth their weight in gold for knowing exactly how you're doing with whatever diet it is that you and your doctor elect to do. You're driving the bus. You don't have to do everything that your doctor tells you to do. That was part of my lesson, is that this is going to, it's not a perfect solution. It's not as entirely accurate as when they draw the blood from your arm, but, and also the little finger pokes, you know, they tend to be aggravating after a while, but stick with it, no pun intended, and you will get a much better idea of what foods are triggering your blood sugars. I had a really bad result with oatmeal, but you might do fine with oatmeal. I can't tell you that. You're going to have to find out. Second tip is when you're buying something from the grocery store, look at the label. Look at the ingredient list, see what's in it, and make sure that you're not getting something that has been spiked or goosed with a little bit of sugar or cornstarch or something like that. There's usually a little label that will print out exactly how many carbohydrates are in a serving. You're going to have to be careful and make sure that you know how many servings there are in a package. It's really dangerous if you get a package of chocolate or something like that, and you know, you read down, it's like, oh, you know, 15 grams of carbohydrate per serving, but there's 4 servings in the package. So you can only have 1/4 of the package to get that 15 grams. So those are probably my 2 biggest tips, is to be diligent about what you eat and to monitor your own blood sugar.
Okay.
Really take charge.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no one can do it for you. No nutritionist can be standing behind you to monitor exactly what you eat. I can't do it. I'm not going to pretend to. So take charge of your own health.
Yeah. Gosh, what I keep coming up, like, you're like, oh, that's a good question, and then it just goes away.
It's in there. I like the streak in your hair.
Oh, thanks. I know, I realized I should have actually been on this side, sitting on that side, but I'm being consistent and sitting on this side today. So I know what I was going to ask you is that, you know, a lot of people that have diabetes are on medications. Mm-hmm. And maybe they're just hearing this for the first time, this information that they actually can take control over their own blood sugar and modify the foods that they're eating to maintain a blood sugar in the lower range. So would you talk then about, you know, how do people go about adjusting what they're eating when they are on medications like metformin, for example, or other things that actually make it so they have to eat more carbs with those medications? So.
Right. Again, I would monitor the blood sugars to see how they're doing. You don't, if you're on a medication, going very low carb can be problematic, if not just outright dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you go too low, you're going to faint. And no one wants to faint. I don't want to faint. I don't want you to faint either. So just make sure that your blood sugars are staying in a good normal range. I got down to 70 once and I thought I was just literally going to fall over. So if you do feel faint, that's a sign that maybe things have gone too low. I would keep the medication on board while you tinker out what kinds of amounts are going to work best for you, and set a clear target for yourself of what is the range that you're trying to stay in. I think the lowest I've seen, when I saw the 70, I had eaten, so my insulin was probably high. And I knew I had eaten something that was bad, so I took a supplement that's designed, not a medication, but a supplement that's designed to lower blood sugars. And I started to feel really woozy, and when I checked and it was 70 something, I was like, okay, this is too low.
Yeah. You'll
get an idea of when you're going to start feeling like low is edging on a little bit too low, and you're probably going to want to set about 5 points higher than that as your target lower margin. And then try to stay under a certain amount too, especially after meals. And you may find that that eating frequently through the day is working well, but you may find that 3 squares a day works fine. It really depends on the individual, on how stable you are. But if you start to feel woozy, I wouldn't even bother to check first, especially if the glucometer isn't handy. I would have something to eat and then check the glucometer.
Yeah, so working very closely with your doctor to monitor the
Exactly.
medication,
You're
yeah.
not going to want to do anything that's dangerous, and working with your doctor is going to be definitely preferred.
Yeah. All right.
Your doctor, in fact, has learned a few things over the years.
So what kind of, let's see, so you usually check before, at least you know typically what your blood sugar is before you eat. What kind of a range do you want to see, like, a raise of no more than how many points do you know is kind of a good meal for you?
For me,
Yeah.
a good meal for me, I'm probably at this point going to be under 120 at the 1 hour mark.
Okay.
I'm finding as time goes on, I think that what's happened is my system is readapting.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it just seems like I'm not getting the really high highs anymore. And I've thought a couple of times about experimenting and having, like, let's recheck that bowl of oatmeal.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if it's still all that awful.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if what I'm doing is working, it's almost like my system has had a chance to rest and recover.
Yeah.
That instead of the constant hammering of blood sugar and insulin, trying to, because I'm type 2, the fat cells were relatively insensitive to the insulin, so the insulin kept jacking up and up and up until the fat cells would unlock and absorb the blood sugar. So the fat cells have had a little bit of a rest from that constant onslaught, and they might actually be a little more sensitive at this point. But on the other hand, if it ain't broke, why should I try to fix it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why should you push that boundary?
Exactly. If I've just hit the normal range, why would I want to get back into the pre-diabetic range?
Yeah, well, and you're not feeling deprived or like you're missing out on a lot of things, and so there's not that desire to, like...
No, not, I mean, yeah, sure, every time sometimes you'll walk past a bakery or something like that and be like, whoa. But it's almost like you can smell the sugar sometimes, and sometimes it seems so intense that it's kind of like, okay, why do people eat stuff like that? So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and you were talking then about, blood sugar of 70 for you being way too low for you. And you might be in that period, like the amount of carbs you're eating right now may be right in that range of, like, sometimes you might be in ketosis and sometimes you might not be. So, but likely over time, you've also become fat adapted, and the way you described hiking, where you can tell you're using your glycogen stores and then you switch over to fat burning, it's actually describing more of a flexible metabolic metabolism.
Right. And this is the kind of thing that is probably really individual. It may be the kind of thing that my system has adapted to more readily than others. Other people may have a harder time with it. I think that you've mentioned this a couple of times where it can take a period of days or weeks for some people to do that switch over.
Yeah.
That's not going to work on a day hike.
Right.
My system has to be flexible enough to do that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I have to boost up my blood sugar and refuel the muscle cells with glycogen at the same time in order to keep going.
Yeah.
I had reactive hypoglycemia for many, many years. I know what hypoglycemia feels like. For me, it's shaky, pale, need to eat a lot now, yesterday. So that's what it feels like for me. Other people describe being really emotional, and that emotion might be anger, it might be sadness, it might be giddy even.
Okay.
Some people describe feeling like their legs are shaking. Some people, you get hypoglycemia enough and you will pass out.
Yeah.
That's been known to happen too. It happens a lot in type 1 diabetes. And what I'm describing right now is mostly for myself and type 2, so type 1 is going to be a little bit different picture. Those people are going to have to work even more closely with their doctor and monitor even more closely. But I have heard tell from type 1 diabetics who are doctors that a lower carb diet can work really, really well.
Yeah, there's quite a few that are doing ketogenic diet out there. Report that it works.
Right, and
very
Dr.
well,
Bernstein he's a medical doctor who's written a book, and he's type 1 diabetic, and I really appreciate the things that he's written because he was an engineer before he became a medical doctor, and he was trying to manage his type 1 diabetes And his wife, I think, who was a medical doctor, got him a glucometer. And he started doing the, let's see what happens when I eat this. Let's see what happens when I eat that. He was the one that I think really inspired me in this regard, because once he took control and realized what the problems were and took the carbs way, way down, I think a lot of type 1 diabetics have got, they tend to get sick and die at an earlier age. I think he's well into his 80s at this point, and going strong enough that he still has a regular teleseminar.
Oh, wow.
So
that's impressive,
yeah, he seems to be in excellent health.
Yeah.
So
great. Yeah.
If you keep the sugars away from different, away from the eyeballs, away from the kidneys, you don't have to follow the path of your ancestors who sometimes had, like I've got a picture of my great-grandma with her leg gone from the knee down.
Oh.
And later on, a few years later, after that photo was taken, they took the other knee too.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And it's because she was diabetic.
Yeah.
And diabetes kills body parts. It kills you a bit at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, because that extra sugar just goes and sticks some places and starts to cause that damage.
Right. So however you can keep your sugars down.
Yeah.
Diet is one way of doing it. You have to be committed to it. And that is a downside. Once committed to it, it's fairly easy to stick to. Once you get through those first rough few days or weeks or whatever, it's very easy to stick to once you start seeing the results and you realize, in your case, how good you feel.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's maybe not for everyone. For people who don't want to take that jump, I really recommend sticking with the medication. Do what works to keep the blood sugars down, because that's going to cause huge problems over time.
Yeah. Well, and I never had type 2 diabetes. It runs in my family, though, and my primary reason for doing the low-carb ketogenic diet was to recover from the car accident that I had, which I've talked about in other ways, at other times. However, the fact that I have type 2 diabetes that runs in my family, and my fasting blood sugar was up to 96, which is not even considered pre-diabetic, but in my training I recognized that was just heading the wrong direction.
It's heading the wrong direction.
It's a little too high for normal. So that was another motivator for me to do this, was to not ever develop diabetes. My fasting blood sugar now runs about 70, and I wanted to talk about that because what happens when you are fully fat adapted, you are in ketosis like I am, your blood sugar does tend to be a lot lower than otherwise, and that's because the higher the ketones get, the lower your fasting blood sugar can be, and you're not going to experience those side effects that you were talking about with the hypoglycemia.
Right.
Because your body is off, the low blood sugar is actually offset by the ketone bodies and the fat metabolism that you're getting. So when you get to that point, and if you choose a ketogenic diet, you can have a lower blood sugar and you're not going to have that hypoglycemia feeling. Because I also had reactive hypoglycemia. If I would do any kind of intense exercise, like hiking, for example, I would need to have, this is, pre-keto, 3 years ago, if I would go on a hike of, even a couple of miles, I would need, some kind of a Cliff Bar or something very high in sugars, because I would start to feel, hypoglycemia for me was very similar to what you described, but it also, to me, I would get very delirious. This like head high, delirious, can't remember where I parked my car type of thing. So I would need constant, sugars during the hike, and then, halfway mark, and then afterwards as well. And contrast that to this last weekend, I actually was able to go for my first hike post-car accident.
Yeah, you went to Wallace Creek Falls, didn't you?
Yeah. So it's about a little more than 5 miles, and not only had I not had breakfast before I hiked this hike, I didn't need any snacks the entire time. I felt a constant, steady energy supply. I didn't need a snack halfway when everybody else is eating, Cliff Bars and sandwiches.
Right, the Lara bars were starting to come out.
Yeah, and I totally, they needed that because they're not in ketosis, they're not burning fat as their primary fuel, which is the steady supply. So, and then even afterwards, we all met to go out to eat afterwards, but I was hungry, but I didn't feel like, oh my God, I can't remember where I parked my car and I'm delirious and I'm shaky. None of that. And so it was such a stark contrast from what I used to experience while hiking. One of the many, many, many benefits that I've experienced that's just, frankly, is life-changing to be able to have that kind of difference. And so I just wanted to add that as well, as that if people are in ketosis, that we're going that low of a carbohydrate diet, that a 70 blood sugar may not be a problem, but if you're
it was a problem for me.
Yeah, well,
and this was probably a year and a half ago too. I may experience it differently now.
Yeah, well, and if people are just watching this or learning about this the first time and they're eating a conventional diabetic diet, a 70 blood sugar would be a problem for them,
right?
If they got that
because
number,
they're not, because your system isn't used to it,
right?
And when the fasting blood sugars, when I first started off, what I was seeing on my glucometer first thing in the morning was typically more like 105, 110, something like that, and that has drifted down into the mid-90s. So I'm really looking forward to some further corrections there over time. Every now and again, it's like, I'm starting to see like maybe the occasional 89.
Oh.
It's like, I can deal with that. So yeah, it's
more butter chicken.
Oh man, the butter chicken. Yeah. So has it been long enough? Should I try checking again? I only had the one rasher of bacon, and I think that speaks to how satiating this is. You eat when you feel hungry.
Yeah, it's been about 30 minutes. Do you want to?
No, let's
keep talking some more.
Let's chat some more.
I'm wondering, any other physical things you noticed? Like, did you used to have like achy joints or anything like that, and that's improved, or anything else you noticed that was like, wow, I didn't even think of that as something that might improve? Or
not so much. I do notice that with the additional oil and fat that I'm getting in my diet, as long as it's not like a complete overload, like if you get hamburger meat, a lot of times it's really got a lot of fat added to it, so it can be pretty dense. But so I don't mean bacon. I mean stuff that's really, really intensely fatty.
Yeah, like
I can feel it coming out in my skin, but having a little extra fat, more so than any other, than most nutritionists really recommend.
Yeah.
My skin actually feels a lot softer.
Yeah.
And you get a little older, you get a few miles under on the odometer, and having skin that's a little softer is really a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed as well. It's just really soft skin.
Right. And most nutritionists will tell you that it's about hydration.
Yeah.
But I think that and to a degree it is, but I think you also need to have an abundant source of fats in your diet. And the way I view skin is it's like an external marker of internal health. If your skin is healthy, a lot of times the internal organs are going to be happier too.
Yeah. Right.
So
have you noticed anything besides softness in your skin, or?
I know that some people, particularly if they're starting a very low carb plan, such as Atkins, because of the way Atkins used to be, there were virtually no vegetables, and they'd complain of constipation.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think is really good about making sure that you're getting a fair number of leafy greens and nuts and seeds, and get that recipe for those infernal keto buns, which is just awesome stuff. But it's got lots of flaxseed in it, it's got psyllium in it, so you're getting lots and lots and lots of fiber. You can get quite a little bit of fiber and not break ketosis.
Yeah. I'll link I know people are going to want to know, but I'll link that recipe below,
you should.
Because I know it's one of your favorite things now.
Oh, it is. It is.
Well, speaking of food then, like what are kind of your go-to tips for stocking your fridge and pantry to make this sustainable, enjoyable?
I should just take a photograph sometime of my grocery cart. Okay, I get a produce delivery.
Okay.
It does have potatoes and things as part of it, but my husband is not even remotely interested in trying a low-carb diet. So he gets the potatoes. The root vegetables in general are pretty strongly carbohydrate rich. So that leaves the leafy greens. It leaves nuts and seeds. It leaves things like butter and cheese, and I too use heavy cream in my coffee. Eggs are on the list. Salmon is on the list. There's so much you can do with a good chunk of salmon. Avocados are on the list. Olives are on the list. Meats, although I think I mentioned earlier that my husband prefers more of a no mammal diet, but chicken is definitely on the list. I cook a lot of things in the crock pot, mostly to save time. So I might take a recipe and it's like, let's just put it all in the crock pot. And then I can just walk away from it for a few hours and come back and it's just steamy and delicious. So, and not being afraid to use cheese, not being afraid of butter. Butter is really not the enemy here.
Well, because was that part of the, I know that for some doctors and nutritionists, that's still part of the recommendation, and I know it was, especially the last 30 years, was that, type 2 diabetes, they need to avoid fat, that was thought that contributed to high blood sugars. I have yet to see a problem with the high fat in my diet affecting my blood sugars. It really, as a matter of fact, that's part of the reason for the demonstration of eating the bacon and then rechecking my blood sugars is, if it was 104 before, what is it now? My guess is it's probably actually dropped a little bit. That would be more typical. So again, and having the glucometer and finding out for yourself. And not that the glucometer is a perfect measure, but at least gives you an idea of whether things are improving or worsening. Right. It gives you all the power then. It gives you the power. Yeah. And I think it's really about finding out what is going to work for your own body. Yeah, that's such a key. There is no one magic, like this is the exact diet that everyone should follow and it works for everybody. I know, and I think that we saw the question the other day, what's a good number of carbohydrates, a good number of grams per day to tell somebody with type 2 diabetes? It's like, it depends. It depends on their body and how they're going to react. So you can, give a few guidelines and encourage them to track it. And probably the most important thing is without a glucometer is how do you feel? Do you feel like you've got enough fuel? Do you feel like you're continuing to crave something, which is generally kind of not such a hot sign? Do you feel like you have got the zip and energy to get up and do the things that you want to do in a given day? Those, that's important too. Yeah, I think those are really fantastic things for people to recognize is that the things that can tell you if you're, I call it the blood sugar roller coaster. It's where you eat too many carbs, your blood sugar goes high, and then your body compensates and it drops too low, which makes you hungry again, and so you go on this roller coaster ride all day long. Right. Yeah, the signs that you were talking about is like if your energy's dropping and you feel tired, if you feel hungry every 2 or 3 hours. I know that most of the time we're taught that you need constant snacks all day long, and that's the healthy way to eat. However, if you find that you are hungry every hour, 2 hours, or even every 3 hours, that's a sign that you're on that blood sugar roller coaster. You should really, and tell me your experience, but I feel like very strongly you should be able to be full for 4 or 5 hours, maybe even 6 hours or longer. That's a really good sign that your blood sugar is more stable. And I remember eating like that too, where I might have, when I was working downtown, I had time for a cup of coffee before I was at the door. I'd get downtown, I'd run into the bagel shop. I'd get a bagel and maybe some cream cheese, but the cream cheese was so fatty. You just maybe use half a package. And then, you'd go to your office and then around 10 o'clock it'd be like, dang, I'm starved. So you'd go to the candy machine just to get a little something to pull you through till lunch. And then lunchtime would come and maybe you'd go down to a sandwich shop and you'd get a side of chips or something. If you were feeling healthy, maybe an apple. And you would have that, and then around 3 or 4 in the afternoon it'd be like crashing again. Oh man, so back to the candy machine. Then you'd get on home. Or Starbucks in the afternoon. And the 24 ounce with lots of with a shot of peppermint syrup and the sweetened whipped cream on top and maybe just the espresso bean just to cap it off with. It is a fake way of jump-starting your energy for the day, and a lot of times the downside is that you won't be able to sleep nearly so well at night with that late afternoon Starbucks. Right. So, and then you'd go home, and because you're all wired from Starbucks, well, let's see, maybe a beer or some wine.
which is more carbohydrates, plus the alcohol, which has a really interesting effect on carbohydrate metabolism as well. And, you know, maybe a big plate of spaghetti.
Yeah, yeah. And then a few snacks afterwards because you're still hungry.
Dessert.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a different mentality. And then when you understand exactly how to hack the system and make it work for you, it's such a revelation. But you have to try it for yourself.
Well,
you
this is a theme that's coming up in these interviews that I'm doing, is that you learn how to work with your body, work with your biology, and then everybody's happy. Your body's happy and you're happy as well. Right. Whereas most other diet approaches that, you know, that I've tried or that I've heard of people trying is that you're fighting against your body, you're fighting against your hunger, you're fighting against feeling tired and still pushing yourself to go work out. Right. Whereas this, you're giving your body to feel it needs. So many years
I tried to lose weight because, you know, it was just a steady creep upwards, and I was doing some pretty intense exercise, and I was eating healthy, and it just wasn't working, and the weight still crept up.
Yeah.
And I've done a lower carb diet previously in my 40s, and probably dropped about 30 pounds then crept back up when I went to an academic institution that shall not be named that has healthy desserts, and I put a bunch of weight back on because I was too stressed.
Yeah,
to
coupled with stress and high carb foods. Yeah,
right. You know, high carb comfort foods. Yeah. Then, you know, I was good to go. And, you know, after that, I dropped some weight, and then it kind of fluctuated back up until I had that, you know, that shocking moment when the MD called me and said, "I want you to start taking metformin." And it's like, you know, nothing really grabs your attention like a doctor telling you that you need to start taking a medication on a permanent basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you think you're doing everything right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course, going off for frozen yogurt probably wasn't really helping either. I did test the swirl frozen yogurt, and it was like, I just have a small little bit. It's like, oh, yeah, that's really wrong. Yeah, and, you know, I'll still have some yogurt, but it will be unsweetened, and it will be high fat.
Okay.
And, yeah, there's going to be some carbs in there, but it's not going to be a horrendous amount of carbs. It's not going to be nearly, and I might even, there's a cat behind me. And I might even add like a small handful of berries to it. I mean, it's kind of a treat to do something like that, but it's still isn't going to bust the bank compared to going to squirrel, which is also costly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you've been very successful in implementing this diet change and keeping it up for a long period of time. What are some of your tips then? Because a lot of people struggle then with certain social situations, with maintaining this.
Social situations.
Do you have tips for us about, you know, how do you navigate, you know, the holidays or birthday parties or potlucks or, you know, potlucks a little easier.
There's a lot of strategies for that. You can, for something like a potluck, you could bring your own food and foods that you know you can eat. And generally there's at least a couple of other things. Everyone's got the cheese tray.
Right, right.
A veggie tray within limits is probably going to be okay. Or another strategy is to make sure that you don't go hungry. You can always slip like one of these little, you know, low-carb bars in your purse, and, you know, if you do get hungry while you're there and there's really nothing much to eat, you can always slip away for a few minutes and then come back after you've had something like that. Water is something that will help to fill the belly. It's not going to provide any calories, but a great one that I've been known to do it in the past, is to, if you're there with a partner, somebody whose cooties you trust, and there's bottles of beer, take one of their bottles, rinse it out, and refill it with water. Everyone will think that you're drinking a beer.
Well, and that's such a good strategy, right? Because you go someplace, and especially if you're new to making some kind of a diet change, you get a lot of pressure from like, well, why aren't you drinking? Or one beer won't hurt you, right? You get a lot of that social pressure. That's a really
And I'm too old to say that I'm expecting. You know, that just doesn't even pass the laugh test anymore. You know, So yeah, if you can do something like that, sometimes there's fizzy water that's set out so that people can make their own mixed drinks, and just having some plain unsweetened fizzy water is one way of coping. It looks like you've got a little something.
Yeah.
Something that is usually a little more on the low carb side if you're out at a restaurant is going to be a Virgin Mary, but not always. It usually comes decorated with a marinated green bean and maybe some olives and a celery stick. It's basically tomato juice. It's going to have some carbs in it. There's no escaping it, but at least it's not going to be an overwhelming number. Let's see, bringing your own stuff, knowing what's on there. Oh yeah, and then but the holidays and family, that's probably the toughest, because no one's going to understand why you don't want to have their special garlic mashed potatoes. And you know, and everyone's going, you know, your great aunt is going to wonder why you don't like her favorite pie anymore. And, you know, it can be difficult to explain. You can tell them something like, I just want to have a tiny bit, and then, you know, look longingly at it, but it's probably more honest just to say no, thank you. And it really depends on your family and how liable they are to pressure you about it. It's a tough one.
Well, those are all really great tips. I love the one about the rinsing out the beer bottle. That's a fun one.
I've done that. I've done that one even before I went low carb.
Okay.
Is to take my own beer bottle and rinse it out, and then just refill it with water. You just keep going back to the kitchen sink and refill it with water, and people think that you are just 3 sheets to the wind. It's like, no, I've had one beer. I'm good to drive. You know?
I've seen you drinking all night. Yeah, it was water.
Right. I know, and it was like that at another party I went to. It was, I think, Jell-O shots was what was being handed out. Definitely not on the low carb plan, but I don't think I ever had even a Jell-O shot in my hand. I basically didn't have anything to drink at all, no alcohol at all that night. But later on, people were saying, "Yeah, you were pretty snockered last night." Like, yeah, okay, that's projection. That's the only thing you were seeing.
Sounds like a radical party for you, a Jell-O shot party.
Yeah, well, I know some pretty radical people. So, yeah, it's, but yeah, navigating the whole social scene. It's, you know, smoke and mirrors, subterfuge, bringing your own stuff, whatever works.
Yeah, and it's all about you're
being true to your core. You know you're doing something good for yourself. You don't want to let somebody pressure you. It's a peer pressure thing. And it's just as sad to see teenage girls being pressured into drinking too much at a party as it is for middle-aged women or anyone else to be pressured into eating sugary foods just to satisfy somebody's need to see you eating those foods.
That's such a great analogy. I hadn't even thought about that, but that's really, really true. It's just as detrimental, maybe even more so on your health.
Yeah. It's peer pressure is what it is, and learning how to resist it is going to, you know, whatever it is that you can pull out of your hat to make it work for you.
Well, and it sounds like a big part of that mindset then is like taking care of yourself your number one priority, and that you are more important than making somebody else happy.
Yeah, exactly. And that is probably something you see in the mental health arena, because I know that you work with people in that category as well, is, you know, what's going to make you happy and what's going to support you best, and not what is, if your behavior is making somebody else unhappy, then that's their problem. It's not your problem.
Yep. It's a hard switch for a lot of people to make.
It is. It is.
Well, and speaking of mindset then and the psychology of all of this, is there any kind of mental tricks that you've found, or like, you know, maybe phrases that you've said to yourself that keep you going, or that have, you know, helped make this easier for you?
I want to be healthy into my 80s. I want to be an example for other people of this is what it can look like to be technically am I still technically type 2 diabetic? I mean, things have corrected.
Right.
I don't even know.
You know, traditional medical model is that once you have it, you always have it. But
I know.
Your blood sugars don't test that way.
My insurance company, bless their heart, they've seen the codes from my doctor, so they have been sending me things of like, you know, you're diabetic. Did you know that you're supposed to have your eyes checked more frequently? It's like, okay, probably really should. So yeah, being healthy well into my 80s is a decided goal.
Yeah.
And I think that this is, there's, you mentioned your family history, type 2 diabetes running in the family. Type 2 diabetes runs in my family too. My mom has it. Everyone in my dad's family, except my dad, had it, has it. Dad is now past tense. But like his sister had it, and probably his mom did too, but they changed the diagnostic criteria, so she never really qualified. But it runs in my dad's side of the family very strongly. So probably for different genetic reasons, but still there, and double whammy. It is what it is. I probably was going to have problems with my blood sugar as long as I was staying on a high carb diet.
Yeah.
It was probably destined.
Yeah.
And I don't know about my brother or sister at this point, but I kind of suspect that one or both of them have. I know that my brother has had some other health problems that tend to be associated with diabetes, so I don't know if he's actually hit that threshold yet where his doctor tells him that he needs to start taking metformin as well. But it's probably coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a very different individual with very different concerns and very different challenges, so he probably will just take the metformin. Yeah. It's his choice. It's everyone's choice.
Absolutely.
How you deal with it is your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is just one way of doing it.
Yeah. 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 I love that. That's your big why. I talk about that with my my people in my groups, is really thinking about why are you doing this, and especially something that's bigger than just weight loss, because weight loss is something you can always do tomorrow. You can put off till next year. Whereas living healthy and feeling good right now and not having the complications of diabetes in your 80s,
right, and
being an example of health to other people, like that's a much bigger motivator that'll help you resist those garlic mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving than like 5-pound weight loss. Like I can do that next month, right?
Anyone can do a 5-pound weight loss.
Yeah.
Can you keep the 5 pounds off?
Yes.
That's really the question.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people start a weight loss plan in New Year's Eve, and this is what, the 29th today?
Yes.
January 29th, something like that.
Yes.
So a lot of people are starting to rethink that strategy, and once you stop the diet, we both know the pounds come right back. I think that, and weight is really, it has less to do with overall health. Things like blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol are much more important to track. And if all I was doing was tracking my weight, I'm sure that I'd be on a very different track.
Right.
But being healthy enough to be going out for a walk with the dog for a couple miles a day, because it's a very active dog.
Yeah.
Being able to go out hiking every weekend.
Right.
I mean, my dad was out hiking me when he was 70. He was really in pretty awesome condition for a very long time. But, all good things must come to an end. He passed last month.
Oh.
So, but he was, had a lot of physical abilities and physical strength up until the last year or so.
Yeah.
And then, but that's another story for another time. We can probably talk about that as a separate topic.
Yeah.
If you ever wanted to talk about dementia and Alzheimer's. And there is some talk that Alzheimer's and dementia are actually kind of a type 3 diabetes.
Yeah,
where it affects the brain instead of affecting other organs.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something we've talked about, and it was the other thing that was a really big motivator for me as well is that I have that very strong on both sides of my family. I have grandmother on both sides that's passed away at 80 years old from complications from dementia, and those are things that develop long before 80. And knowing that link with chronic high blood sugar was another big motivator for me. And frankly, losing my maternal grandmother just this last July to complications of dementia as well was a motivator for my son, who's only 20, to also take on a ketogenic diet as well. I'm going to start as early as I can to prevent all of these things. And so
I think that, if you start and maintain good health when you are younger, you're more likely to have that longevity that takes you through to your elder years in really
Yeah.
good shape.
All
Yeah,
right.
and
Yeah.
you know, and I don't know about your grandparents, but you know, I know that it's really especially sad seeing somebody who's bright and witty and intelligent and sharp and really at the top of their game start to go downhill, and it starts with so insidiously.
Yeah.
It seems so small at first, but you know, not to get paranoid about it. Just because I lost my keys the other day doesn't mean that this, you know, it plays a mental trick with you.
Yeah.
You can edit that part out.
Okay. You lost your keys, yeah.
So
And,
yeah,
so I
so
think
it probably has been a good
close.
45 minutes now.
Yeah, we're at 55 minutes now. So if you'd like to recheck the bacon experiment.
The
here
bacon
to
experiment,
see,
it was just the one, and this was the hand that I washed. Let's take, oh, that's a nice big fat drop of blood. And I always put it in my mouth to sop up the
so you don't have stains on your fingers.
103.
All right.
So it was
You wanna
104
show
before, 103 now.
Here's proof here. So
Right, the bacon, it really didn't touch the blood
it
sugar.
didn't have any effect on it, pretty much.
Yep.
So don't fear the bacon.
Don't fear the bacon. It's not going to touch your blood sugar. It's
Yeah.
not going to make you. And you know, oh, and this is another thing is that I must be blessed with some pretty good anti-inflammatory carbohydrate kind of things. Even though the total cholesterol is fairly high, my HDL tends to be fairly high. Like the low end of my HDL is about 70.
Oh, yeah.
So if I'm exercising and eating high fat, it tends to go up to, like most recent is 87.
Oh, that's
So it's pretty high, and I had my coronary calcium screening done, which is, I know a clinic that will do it for $99 because
Okay.
insurance won't cover. It was like, there's this much buildup of plaque in my coronary
Oh,
arteries.
so that's a 0 you're holding.
Zero,
up.
yes, it's this much.
Yeah, so that is a much better indicator of your cardiovascular health than any cholesterol
Than any
number.
cholesterol reading, yeah. So
that's fantastic.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
important to track these numbers
Yeah.
and you know, nip things in the bud if you need to.
Yeah.
A lot easier to treat something at the beginning than it is when it's in a full bore, you know, state of mass panic kind of place.
Yeah, well, and that's probably a very good indicator then that your blood vessels in your brain are healthy as well.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Well, anything else that you want to share with us before we wrap this up? And
I would love to start guiding people through this process.
Okay.
And, you know, if I can support them, even if all I do is arrange for them to get a glucometer, a lot of times insurance is tricky. A lot of times
there's a way you can get a free one, though.
you can get a free
Yeah.
glucometer with some initial test strips. This is the part that is expensive. These are the test strips. And I think that I get 2 of them, and I think even with insurance it's still about $70, but there's what, 50? Yeah, there's 50 test strips.
Okay.
So it depends on how, you know, over time, because I've come to learn exactly what's happening with my blood sugar and I know how to eat, I don't feel as compelled to check it. But when I first got it, I think it came with an initial like 20 test strips. And it was just like, I blew through that. I think it was like 2 days. It's like, let's see what happens when I eat an apple. Oh, look. Let's see what happens when I go to swirl. So I had to go down and get some more almost right away. And those ones took a little while longer, but by the end of that first batch, I had a pretty solid idea of what was triggering the spikes in blood sugar.
Okay.
So it took a while, and it took a while to figure out when the peak of blood sugar was after I'd eaten. So, and that is going to be such an individual thing. It's going to depend on your digestion and your enzymes, how good your stomach acid is, how efficient your little intestinal cells are at pulling stuff out and into the blood, into circulation, how fast your liver processes things. It's going to depend on a lot of things. So my experience might be 180 from somebody else's experience. Maybe somebody else sees the peak at half hour. It's probably going to depend on what you eat too. Some things are absorbed and into the system a lot faster.
Yeah.
So.
Well, great. So if people would like to contact you, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh,
or
wow.
Know more about you.
I love this question. I am in Lake Forest Park, Washington. My website is www.drvicki.com. That's DOCTORVICKI.com. I have a business phone Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and that number is 206-295-1211.
Well, excellent. Well, I so appreciate you being on to talking with me and sharing so openly about your experience and being just, authentic self.
I can't be an example unless I'm authentic about it,
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm being something different.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well,
thank you so
again,
much for having me.
Yeah, you're
welcome.
welcome.
It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for watching. It's been Carole Freeman, Hypnotic Nutrition.
And Vicki Rhoades. I think the cats are like really grooving on this space back